Good afternoon. I'm here with Roger Tarbutton, candidate for Overland Park City Council, Ward 2. On behalf of the Johnson County Public Policy Council, thank you for being here today. The Johnson County Public Policy Council is made up of 10 chambers of commerce in Johnson County. Our goal is to provide information about public policy issues impacting area businesses. Roger, you ready to get started?
I'm ready to get started. Thank
Okay.
you, Kevin.
As a candidate, what are your top 3 policy issues?
Right, my top 3 policy issues would be, number 1, I believe that it would be beneficial to implement a public comment period prior to city council meetings. In walking my neighborhood, I've noticed several people who complain they don't really feel like the city council is listening to their concerns. So I think that a mandatory public comment period would be very beneficial in encouraging citizens to engage with the council and to participate in the decision-making process. My second policy issue would be to reduce reliance on tax incentives. I'm not opposed to tax incentives. I think in some cases they make sense and they're beneficial. But I do feel like in the current environment, the city appears to be overusing tax incentives. And I think that this can be detrimental not only to the business community but also to the city. And the detriments that I see in overusing tax incentives would be to put public funds at risk and also to reduce the tax base. Other detriments would be, I think that the overuse of tax incentives can overstimulate development that's not really related to market conditions, which could down the road cause problems. Thirdly, I think that tax incentives seem to be calculated on a basis to assure private developers that they are going to make a profit. They will have a decent profit margin. And I don't think the city should actually be getting involved in determining how much profit a private entity can make on a project. My last priority policy issue would be to protect residential neighborhoods from potential negative impacts of large-scale development. I think that we need to protect the vibrancy of our neighborhoods, and that if we do have large development near them, I think that it should be done at a scale and an appearance such that it will not have a negative impact on property values and the livability of the adjoining neighborhoods.
Okay. At 13.566 mils, Overland Park's tax rate is approximately half of our neighboring communities and remains the lowest of any first-class city in Kansas. Do you believe Overland Park citizens receive quality services and value for their tax dollars? And what improvements, if any, would you make to the existing city budget?
Right. Yeah, overall, I do believe that city residents get a good value for their tax dollars. But I would have some suggestions of things which I think could improve upon that. One thing being, I think that common with other governmental entities, I think there tends to be an over-reliance on the outsourcing of projects to consultants. And I think that this could be an area that could be looked at to determine if we are doing that needlessly when the consulting that needs to be done could actually be just as well studied through the staff. Another suggestion I would make is that the budgets that I've looked at, the current budget seems to rely upon the continuation of future inflation of real estate in order to generate more funds. And I don't think we can ever really rely upon inflation, although there seems to be in general a trend of inflation. There are occasions like in a downturn in the economy when we could get caught with a declining valuations of real estate. And that could create a huge problem for the budget. So I don't think we should rely so much on a continuation of inflation. Also, I don't think that we should spend down the cash reserves needlessly. I think we need to keep those on hand in case we have an economic downturn. And finally, as previously mentioned, I think that sometimes we tend to have an over-reliance on the use of tax incentives, which can also reduce the tax base. So those would be my suggestions.
Okay. What role, if any, do you believe the city should play in economic development to bring jobs and capital investment to Overland Park?
I believe that Overland Park does have a role to play in encouraging economic development. I think the main role would be to continue to provide excellent infrastructure and other city services such as police and fire protection to the citizens, which I think increases livability and will attract future business, jobs, and residents to the city of Overland Park. I think that this type of prioritizing of those types of services has worked in the past in attracting development to Johnson County and the city of Overland Park, and I think that that will continue in the future. So I think that we should prioritize that. Also, I think that we should continue to partner with business community, educational institutions, not-for-profits, and organizations like the Chamber of Commerce in attracting business development.
What is your philosophy regarding the appropriate mix of residential, commercial, and green space in development and redevelopment projects, and the use of incentives for these projects?
I think that there's a place for mixed-use development in the city, and I'm not opposed to it. However, I do believe that in order to protect our existing neighborhoods, especially in a suburban city such as Overland Park, I think we need to be careful when we have new development adjacent to existing residential neighborhoods that it doesn't have a negative impact on those neighborhoods. And so there's different ways to do that. I think the use of green space is one method to do that. I think I would encourage as much green space as possible in development because it can reduce the impact of noise and traffic, increased traffic, and runoff from stormwater onto adjacent neighborhoods. Another thing is that I think that the sizing of these mixed-use developments or high-density developments needs to be congruent both in scope and in appearance with the surrounding neighborhood so that it has a lesser impact. As far as tax incentives, as previously indicated, I think that I would want to avoid overuse of tax incentives. I think that they can be used for specific purposes and are useful. Primarily, I would use them for development of distressed areas as opposed to using tax incentives for just run-of-the-mill types of construction.
Okay. What do you think the three greatest opportunities are for Overland Park's economy in the next 10 years, and how would you capitalize on them?
Yes, I think Overland Park offers a lot. And I think we have a lot of advantages. I think one is our lower tax rates than the adjoining cities and even most of the first-class cities in the state of Kansas. We provide good services for relatively low tax rates, and I think that encourages development and jobs and residents to move to Overland Park from a regional standpoint. I think another benefit that we have is just the benefit of being located in the Midwest, where we have generally lower cost of living than does other parts of the United States. And I think that also attracts business and residents. And I think that we can capitalize on that by pointing that out in marketing campaigns and that sort of thing. A third thing that I believe that is very beneficial for the city of Overland Park is its just high quality of life that it offers its residents. And we consistently are ranked high in livability standards nationwide. And I think that also attracts new business and jobs and residents from all over the country. And I think we need to be very careful to protect that, especially at the neighborhood level, so that we can continue to offer that.
What specific elements of Forward OP's action agenda do you consider to be among the highest priorities for implementation?
Yes, I think Forward OP was a very useful exercise. I think it engaged a lot of people who were excited about the future of Overland Park and wanted to have input and what that future would look like. I personally, I would prioritize basically three things that came out of that, which I thought were the most important, and let you know how I would promote them. First one would be citizen engagement. I think that citizen engagement is very important, probably vital to the city, and as earlier mentioned, one of my policy changes would be to implement a public comment period prior to each city council meeting. I think that will encourage people to engage with the city council and hopefully take a more active role in the decision-making process. Secondly, I think that one aspect or goal that was pointed out in the Forward OP was to maintain vibrant neighborhoods. And I would, of course, like to continue to protect our neighborhoods. And in a suburban area like Overland Park that's experiencing a lot of development and growth, I think we need to be very careful in how we plan that growth and development so it doesn't have a negative impact on our neighborhoods. Lastly, fiscal responsibility. I think that's essential to maintain our relatively low tax rates and continue to attract business. And I think in order to do that, one aspect of that, I think, is my concern about the overuse of tax incentives, which I think can reduce the tax, the basic tax base of the city, and so I think we need to be very careful that we don't overuse those.
As the second largest city in the metro, what is your philosophy on the role Overland Park should play in terms of metro area issues?
I think that Overland Park should play a role in helping to lead the metro area in common issues. I think we share a lot of common issues and problems with metro-wide with the other cities, both on the Kansas side and the Missouri side. And I think that we should play a leadership role when that's possible. I think we should cooperate to the extent that we can. I do think that city leadership should always keep in mind that, however, that they do represent the residents of the city of Overland Park, and that should be their priority.
Okay. And as we wrap up, tell us why you're seeking public office. What do you believe distinguishes you from your opponents in the race, making you best suited to serve?
Yes, first off, I'd just like to say that I do respect the other candidates who are running. However, I do believe that my experience, academic background, and commitment to the residents of Overland Park sets me apart from the other candidates. I have a long history with Johnson County and the city of Overland Park. I've lived in Overland Park approximately 20 years, raised my daughter here with my wife, Ruth. I grew up in Johnson County, graduated from Shawnee Mission North High School, and after high school, after attending college and law school, I returned to Johnson County to make it my home. I worked approximately 30 years for Johnson County government in their in-house legal department, where I provided various types of legal advice and services to various county departments, such as the wastewater department, mental health, MedAct. And so I think I've got a very broad knowledge of the community, its history, and so I think that will be very beneficial to have someone with that extent of knowledge and background on the city council. Also, I think that of the other candidates, I'm probably the only one who is really advocating change. And the change I'm advocating basically is my three policy issues I previously mentioned. I would like to see the implementation of a public comment period prior to city council meetings. I'd like to see a reduction in what I consider to be the overuse of tax incentives. I think tax incentives have a place, but I have a fear that they're being overused, and which could result in issues down the road if we should have a downturn in the economy. Also, I think that it reduces the tax base negatively and provides some incentives to developers in the way of increasing their profit margins, which I don't really feel is appropriate for a government to do. I think that businesses are in the business of taking a risk in order to make a profit. Governments are not in that business. So I think we need to be careful when we give incentives to businesses that we don't go overboard and get caught up in something that could result in problems down the road if there's an economic downturn. In other words, we shouldn't be assuming that risk. And lastly, I would like to see additional steps taken to protect the vibrancy of local neighborhoods in the event that there's large developments going on in the area. Because we all know Overland Park will continue to develop, it will continue to grow, but we need to mitigate the negative consequences of that on surrounding neighborhoods.
Well, Roger, thanks for spending some time with us today, and we wish you the best of luck with the election.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I hope that there'll be a big turnout for the primary on August 6th. Thank you.